Welcome to Net Impact, the podcast that demystifies and explores the influence of cybersecurity and cybercrime across the world and into our lives. Brought to you by ThriveDX, the global leader in cybersecurity training. Here's your host and guide to the digital world, Fred Menachem.
Welcome back to Net Impact. Once again, I'm your host, Fred Menachem. We are here for segment 2 with my friend, my brother, Darren Argyle. If you haven't seen segment 1 yet, you need to make sure you watch that. So today, once again, if you missed it, we're joined by Darren Argyle, and Darren is an internationally recognized executive. He's been in I'm sorry, I hate to age you, but he's been in the cybersecurity industry with 20 years of experience, and it's been across Singapore, the United Kingdom, Australia, working for companies in every part of the world. He's been a group chief information security risk officer. He's worked at banks like Standard Chartered. He's worked as a group CISO at Qantas Airlines and S&P Global and on, and IBM. I'm going to embarrass you again every time I do this. He's turning red. But, we're going to get into this a little bit later. He's co-founded the Cyber Leadership Institute, which is really exciting stuff, back in 2018. And they're doing great things helping professionals transition into leadership roles. He's written a book, which we did talk about in the first episode. And I won't overly embarrass him again, but he's won a lot of awards. Top 100 CISOs globally, top 100 IT security influencers globally, et cetera, et cetera. He also advises Night Dragon, and we're, under their portfolio as ThriveDX as well, which is a cybersecurity investment firm. And he was recently named as an advisor to them. And he's an ambassador for the Global Cyber Alliance as well. So I'm so happy to be here again. Darren, thank you for joining us, my man. What's happening?
Great to be here, Fred.
Segment 2.
Yeah, great to be back on here. Thank you. I appreciate the invite back. Look forward to it.
Let's talk for a moment, and we'll talk a little bit later about what you're doing with the Alliance. So let's transition now to talk about something that I know is near and dear to your heart, and something that you're really trying to teach folks through the Cyber Leadership Institute. The difficulty of transitioning from technical roles to executive leadership, and I know that you saw a big gap, right, between those. So tell me about that.
Yeah, so this was back in about 2017. I think I'd had a career that was difficult and challenging, tough. And in all that time, the things that helped me get through either the next career or the next job, or even helped me land jobs, was mentorship. But I had to go out and seek these mentors. Luckily, I enjoyed communicating and connecting with people. Used to go to lots of conferences and events. So I built quite a big network where I was living in the UK at the time. Then I moved to Australia, and I met two people in Australia, Phil Zongo and Jan Schroeder, who were both my co-founders of the Cyber Leadership Institute. And we sat down through a common interest, and we had coffee, and we talked about some of the challenges that are in the world. And we seem to have this common experience of cybersecurity professionals shortage from a skills perspective at the executive layer. Now, we know there's skill shortage, or has been skill shortages throughout cybersecurity. We've got something like 4 million unfilled vacancies, depending on which reports you look at. But we believed back then, which I still think is this very true today, is that there's a skills shortage at that executive level. And if you look at some of the kind of new regulations coming out from the US in particular, like the new SEC rules, where board members need to be articulate in cybersecurity, we're now seeing CISOs, Chief Information Security Officers, advising boards, moving into board roles, again, which is creating even more of a gap. So we need to be constantly helping get technical professionals become cybersecurity leadership executive specialists, so that they can help communicate cybersecurity in a way that elicits action, whether that's funding, the ability to do transformations, to change environment.
And on that note, I mean, I imagine there's lots of challenges professionals face. For example, when you're a CISO and you're talking about being able to speak to the executives and that kind of thing, because at the end of the day, there's so much advice they can give, right? But if the board or the executives don't take their advice, we see all the things that are being caused. So what kind of challenges do they face? What advice do you give? And that sort of thing to...
I think a lot of it comes down to something like culture. That's the key thing that you're trying to change in an organization. And actually, you mentioned this, the front cover of the FC magazine. One of the things that I talked about in that article was you won't make any traction in an organization culturally if you don't have support of the most senior leaders, like the board members and the CEO. We are kidding ourselves as cybersecurity professionals, no matter how charismatic we think we are, that you're going to change culture in an organization. So our job as senior cybersecurity executives is to have a compelling narrative that convinces the board, the CEO, and the C-suite that cybersecurity is worth taking seriously, not just in the prevention of a major cyber crisis, but a competitive advantage, not just the cost of doing business. And if you can get that into the psyche of the board members and senior leaders in an organization, it has an impact. And by the way, for large banks, large corporations like that, they've got regulators pushing them to do this.
Sure.
But there's plenty of other organizations that don't have that. I worked for a fintech in the UK, which is a global fintech, was Call Market, was then bought by S&P Global. I was the CISO there. I was lucky enough, through a lot of persuasion, to convince the CEO of that fintech, who was not regulated, to do a comedy video out to his employees, which were about 10,000 at the time. That had a dramatic effect on changing the culture in that organization, because he was telling the story about the importance of cybersecurity, not me. And that's a big shift, I think, that cybersecurity professionals need to have, is to have a conversation that's compelling enough that they take it seriously and do something about it.
And I think that speaks to what you spoke about earlier. You always knew how to communicate very well, and teaching that, which makes me transition very well into the Cyber Leadership Institute and its mission, because, you know, that's what it's all about. I mean, in a nutshell, I'll let you talk about it. I may know there's a 100-day plan that the Institute teaches, which you could talk about, and the role, you know, in training, and, you know, tell us a little bit about that. Sort of feeds into that we're talking about.
So as I mentioned this earlier, Fred, I think mentorship was one of those things that was important, but we needed to think of a way of scaling that, because we'd all had mentors, but if you wanted to help people right across the world, and by the way, we now represented, or we should say we've got customers in over 70 countries around the world since 2018. So we're very proud of the fact that we were able to help so many people on such a global scale. But to do that, we had to build programs that scaled to that. So it scaled the three of us, it scaled the training, it scaled the expertise. And our focus was on leadership. So helping people to be able to communicate clearly and concisely so that they're able to convince key stakeholders, whether that was regulators, the board, the CEO, and others. By the way, Fred, when we first started off, we said we just want to solve the problem for emerging CISOs and new CISOs. So quite a narrow group. But what we found quickly over time is that a lot of people realize that leadership skills can be very helpful earlier in your career. So now we've had people as young as 24 joining our programs, recognizing that if you get good at leadership skills, it becomes a career accelerator. It's the thing that makes you stand out from the crowd, stand out from your peers, allows you to be more impactful during an interview and in your first 100 days. So you're more successful. So career success is something that we talk about as well. Personal branding, the ability to do well in the first 100 days, how to stand out from the crowd, how to have a compelling narrative, not just in the interviews, but also with executives. And that becomes a career accelerator, not just for CISOs, but for emerging leaders as young as even 24, as I mentioned earlier.
Look at it and give me how does it all work? I mean, like, give me the nutshells. I mean, the building block. How does this all put together? You know, where do folks go? Is it online? Do you have conferences? That sort of thing. I know I'm throwing a lot at you, Darren, but
no. So it is online. So we've got the Cyber Leadership Hub, which is our free platform. So you'll find us by doing a search on Google, internet, cyberleadershipinstitute.com. On there, you'll find a free login to the Cyber Leadership Hub. You log onto the hub as a free member and you get access to all this free content. So you're already up and running. You get access to free content, playbooks, toolkits, and everything else. You get access to a thriving community. There's a jobs board. There's specialist community areas that you can dip into. So if you've got a specialist area that you're interested in. So that's the first thing. You join a community, you've got access to this platform. If you're more curious and interested to take the next level, you can join the Cyber Leadership Program, which is an 8-week program, an online program. But crucially, Fred, those cohorts are kept quite small because we want to be sure. Intensive. It's the three of us. You don't get other teachers on there. It's the three co-founders joining those goals.
You get the big guns over here,
yeah,
right?
you get the practical experience. So it's real world experience. We've been living it every day. So you get that. You join the weekly calls. And by the end of the 8 weeks, we're not testing you. We're giving you a capstone project to deliver, a cyber resilience strategy and a board paper, and you present that live. We also do a live crisis simulation. So it's real world. And you've only got to look at the comments from our cohort members and alumni. We are very humbled, Fred, by some of those testimonials, and it's very rewarding. That's fantastic to hear people doing great things and getting promoted, by the way, on the back of it.
Hey, by the way, let me tell you something. I've heard great things about it. I've spoken to several people who have graduated from the course, and
fantastic.
They speak volumes of it. And when I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you're really one of the only folks that are doing this kind of thing across the world, globally, like really at this level, more focused on executives. Although you said you're bringing in, younger people, but my understanding is that this is really not only is it high level, but it's folks that are willing to talk about the mistakes they made, folks that have a lot of that push integrity, the importance of that in the industry. But I've heard amazing things about it, so I'm really happy to hear it. And the great thing is too, Darren, when you talk about it, you can see how excited you are. This is authentic, it's genuine, and you love to make a difference and help people. And I really don't want to put words in your mouth, but I get excited when you talk about it. And it takes me a lot to get excited about stuff. So, I mean, you feel really good about this, right? It's something you love.
100%. I mean, we talk about this at the Cyber Leadership. We give so much of our own time. So you do these 8 weeks, but something that we do, and we say this to everybody, and anybody could quote us on this. We tell everybody who goes through that program, you can reach out to us, any three of us, at any time, if you're about to go to a job interview or prepare for a job interview. We'll jump on a call with you. We'll talk you through how you should prepare yourself. Why do we do that? Well, one, we're helping the individual, but it's our contribution. If people are successful and landing, getting, and we've seen countless examples of where they've been successful in interviews, there's thanked us and everything else. We feel great. They've been successful. It's just a win-win. And that kind of service that we can give, it becomes something that's helpful to the business. Obviously revenues and everything else is helpful. We see that as oxygen, Fred. We're not even taking salaries from this, by the way. We're just enjoying giving this back to the community. And by the way, we've just been recognized for our contribution in the industry by one of the largest. We've been going since 2018. It's been hard work, trying to run a business. It's a startup,
Yeah.
But now the team started to grow. We're systems and processes in place. Anyway, we were, for our work, especially, by the way, Fred, on helping women in cybersecurity, because we run a lot of free scholarships. We do a lot of free scholarships to women's communities. Absolutely. And so ISC2, which were previously called ISC Squared, the largest cybersecurity membership community in the world, reached out to us from the US, which is very humbling, by the way, and said, look, we'd love to put together a strategic partnership with you. We don't run senior leadership strategic programs for senior cybersecurity executives. We've heard great things about what you're doing, and we'd love to partner with you. So now we've been running that partnership. We're just about to kick off our first cohort jointly with ISC2 in October. And, they get a great discount if you're a member of ISC2. And already we can see huge potential. And then in the new year, working again with ISC2, we're going to be running a women's only cybersecurity leadership program, the first of a kind. And that's going to help people in Asia specifically. And that's going to kick off in Singapore. And we're excited about that as well.
Well, let me say this before I segue to the next topic. We have so much to talk about. There's something you said that really, they hit me really in a good way because, I work with Thrive DX, obviously, and
Of course,
they
yeah.
produce this and all of that. And, of course, we're in a similar business in a sense, training. And, as we watch and, we talk about all these jobs and we bring in folks that didn't necessarily have the chance to go to school or, never had the opportunity, or folks that want to upskill and are kind of stuck. And so every day we see, like you said, you teach them to interview, we help them, we help them to get jobs and how to interview. And you see that every day. And that that really hits home, something like that makes such a difference. It's not about money. It's not about anything else. It's about watching somebody who may have never had the opportunity to really move up in life because of that traditional mentality. And it's life-changing. And I see it on your face, and I'm so happy to share that same feeling with you. So thank you for what you do there. And I can't wait to even learn more. And I'm sure I'm going to hear even more positive things about it after, we release this segment. But I did want to talk about something when we were in the pre-interview, and I hadn't even thought about this, and it took me a minute to understand. You were talking about supply chain risks, and I said, well, I don't understand. How does that have something to do with cybersecurity? And you gave a few examples. Tell us about that. How that relates to cyber, because it was so interesting to me. You talked about the Y2 car. You talked about a lot of things.
Yeah, so I lived through Y2K, and John Kostonen from the US was the person who really took the bull by the horns and made a difference in that space, working under Bill Clinton's administration. What that were demonstrated was this private-public partnership, and if you come together, you can make a difference. I think we're in the same situation today, by the way, with cybersecurity, where we need public-private partnerships coming together. But more importantly, the focus on the supply chain becomes crucial. And what do I mean by that? Well, the supply chain is an extended ecosystem of what every organization is dependent on: governments, large organizations, and small organizations. Typically, you'll have the smaller vendors who are supporting the larger organizations who are looking to grow through those vendor supply chain relationships. Now, in cybersecurity, practically everybody knows you're only as strong as the weakest link. So the weakest link is often the supply chain or the smaller provider. We saw with SolarWinds, for example, suppliers to large organizations, that was obviously a vulnerability was found, it was exploited, but then, organizations were actually using that, so that inadvertently brought a vulnerability into their environment through a supplier. And we've seen lots of examples of these supply chains. In fact, not cybersecurity necessarily, but if you look at the recent attack on Hezbollah, which was the pages that had recently blown up, which I know is very public at the time at which this is going out, that was an attack on the supply chain that ultimately resulted in the core Hezbollah being attacked directly. So Hezbollah were only as strong as the weak. They thought they had the strong link by not using mobile phones, will use an old system of pages. But the weak link in that situation was a supply chain. Now, the supply chains are not only weak links that need to be exploited and something to be defended against, which is absolutely true. But supply chains, if understood properly, can become a business advantage in cybersecurity. So third-party supply chain risk, if I'm a large bank and a vendor comes to me like a fintech and says, the fintech says, I want to do business with you. The first thing a bank will do is an assessment of that supplier. If that supplier comes up short with their cybersecurity capabilities and maturity, they won't do business with them. The smart smaller businesses, like the CEO of my business, the market guy in the UK, he realized this. He saw the business advantage of being a secure supplier. So he built his security to a level that was at the same level as the banks. So when the banks did the assessment, we were seen as a secure supplier to do business with, and it then became a competitive advantage. So this is how you can switch it from where a vulnerability to being a competitive advantage, which is interesting as well.
It's like a man in the middle attack in a sense. Same concept, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, that's what look at me, the cyber tech expert. But no, it is. It's a man in the middle, right? So people were not thinking about protecting. I mean, encryption they were, but literally from a physical, nobody was thinking, right? Protecting the supply chain. That's very interesting. So now you're seeing a lot of vulnerabilities because of that, right? And it's going to.
And the supply chain, is also under attack now. So what you found is that attackers spend money to attack an organization, and it costs money to do that. It costs time, resources. They're set up like a company. They have a CEO, they have a finance guy, they have have all these teams, right? They're very well funded. But they know that when they go after attacking any type of organization, there's going to be a cost to doing that. Now, a lot of the large banks, large pharmaceuticals, in fact, larger organizations generally are very well fortified. So that means that the cost of attacking and compromising those organizations, although it could be a big payoff, costs a lot of money. So now they're putting their attention to the supply chain of those organizations, the one level down. And by the way, what else is lucrative to them in that space? Not only the crown jewels that can be of value, like databases, but they also know that the insurance premiums will now pay out at those lower levels. Right. So now they're going and attacking the smaller guys who are mid-market, actually, not necessarily the small ones, attacking them and hopefully getting paid out on the insurance premium or the databases. So this is where the supply chain is becoming an interesting area to focus on as well.
It's interesting too, if you remember, and I'm sure you do, because I follow this stuff. Well, one, I'm very interested in national security, foreign policy, all that, but just follow it in general, because it's not always about governments or bad actors. Sometimes it's just criminal hacking, hacking groups. And if you remember, they finally realized, okay, let's stop hitting the U.S. and all these big institutions. They started hitting. I remember they hit Costa Rica, places like that did not have the infrastructure. Yes, it wouldn't pay out as much, but quick little hits. I mean, I remember they're hitting all these small countries that didn't have the protection. And, it was look, everything's a business. It was a criminal enterprise who smartly figured that out. And so what we're seeing now is a vulnerability, obviously. And so let's kind of tell me, so what is look, cyber, and you know this, better than anybody, you were always, criminals are always one step ahead, right? Things are always moving so fast. Sometimes you want to fix something, but it's a matter of a company spending the dollars, right? Where are we with the supply chain thing? How do we now protect this entire infrastructure? Because as we know, economies impact countries and impact, you can impact the supply chain for medical supplies and kill an entire, nation.
Yeah, I have my personal view on this, and there's also my personal view. And if you just look at, I'll give you just a very good example. So if large banks, large corporations, very well funded, typically from a cybersecurity perspective, largely not only from their own protection and what they need to do to protect their customers' assets, but also you've got regulators that are, constantly making sure that we don't want systemic attacks on an infrastructure, which could be government and financial and all those organizations that literally form part of critical national infrastructure. My personal view is it's those large organizations that need to step up. So how can they do that? So I'll give you an example. In Singapore, for example, you've got something called the Cybersecurity Agency, which is a government-funded organization. So this is where I talked about, it's kind of gone full circle with the Y2K and the public-private partnerships. You need large organizations to partner with cybersecurity agencies like in Singapore and say, how do we help these small businesses so they can sponsor them, they can do the funding, they can bring awareness to this, and they need to help fix the ecosystem. It's not about big banks standing back and going, it's your problem. Like a lot of large organizations, they have to be part of that solution, get involved, build those private-public partnerships to help make sure that, firstly, those small businesses, because that's the start of all this, understand the importance of securing themselves. By the way, 60% of small businesses, it's a statistic that was maybe a few years old now, but I don't think it's much different, especially in Asia, go out of business within the first couple of years of having a major cyber crisis. So that's an alarming statistic in itself for small organizations. I talked about the business advantage of being secure. So there's some very big incentives, but it's the larger organizations that need to take on that responsibility. So as an example, if I'm managing my vulnerabilities really well in a large organization and I'm staying on top of every new vulnerability coming out, I need to be making sure that my supply chain is doing exactly the same thing. And it becomes this, not just your first, second, third rate supply, you've got its nth supplier. I mean, there's lots of technologies and tools, I know Night Dragon in particular is looking at a lot of technologies and solutions to help solve some of these supply chain issues. And if anybody's not looked at that portfolio, they should do. I can't think of anything off the top of my mind, but maybe we can put that in the notes about potentially what's in there.
I do know that you spoke about, first of all, your wife's a meditation teacher and she encouraged you to incorporate wellness into your routine. You spoke about it, you spoke a bit about it, and then also the importance of mental health in the cyber industry and work-life balance and all that. Why don't you kind of wrap that up, that part of it for us, and why it's so important, and the burnout rate and all of that.
Yeah,
I gave you a lot just now, but I figure you can just wrap it. I know.
I'll just give a quick overview of the thing. So, this was about 7 years for me. My wife got into meditation. I thought I'd just try it, just to see what it was like. I thought I was doing everything that you needed to do, Fred. I was working out, eating healthy, getting all that regular exercise. But we all know on some level that we overthink, right? To some degree, everybody overthinks. We have those nights, we go to bed and our mind races, right? So there's lots of practical evidence now that shows that meditation helps slow down that. We have something like 60,000 thoughts every single day, and most of those are negative, and most of those are the things that we had yesterday. So we ruminate, and they create grooves in our brains and everything else.
Sure.
By the way,
and ADHD is even worse. Let's be realistic.
ADHD is even worse.
Right. I mean, come on, that's right.
Grooves, actually.
Of course, the negativity, right? Exactly.
Yeah. But by the way, this is my wife telling me all this. So, but I've learned through practicing it that you can have an effect. So, if you don't want to be spending time and all the things that have happened over the previous days, and you don't want, that's by the way, which leads to depression, and you don't want to be thinking about all the things in the future, which is anxiety. You need to be more present. That's what meditation teaches you to be, is in the moment, more present. By the way, the more present we are, the less that we're thinking. And the less that we're thinking, it just gives our brain this downtime so that when we do have those moments where we're walking around in an environment, we're not overthinking. So it just gives our brain the rest. By the way, Fred, we were never designed for this. We're still tribal people at hand. Sleep was enough, but we're bombarded with all these phones and things. So we need something today to get that stress level down. I think meditation's the answer, by the way.
And I'm quite envious, by the way. I say this in all seriousness because, I feel like you and I seem to share a lot of similarities, and like I said, ADHD is a gift, but it also can be very difficult. And you are somewhere where I've always been dying to be, and I always say, "Oh, it's impossible. I can't do it." Now I feel challenged, and we're gonna have to spend time offline talking about how I could start meditating more and be centered, because you start to believe at times you can't do that, and so I know that this is something you also talk about at the, you told me earlier at the Institute, something you push people not to get burnt out. And and of course, and that's something that's so important. Now, it's amazing what you're doing there, and I love it. I wanted to just, before we end, so I was surprised by something. I told you I was doing a lot of research because I love to learn new things and about new people. So in May of 2023, you wrote an article. I said, we have something in common. You're Jewish, man. Your grandmother was a Holocaust survivor. Come on. Mazel tov. Right. Of course I saw it. I was like, last night, it was like one of the last things I saw. And I was like, wow. I was like, isn't that so fascinating? So it's matriarchal, which means that, you
come through another side.
But right. The reason I brought it up, well, one, because I was excited being a Jewish person, but also, you always like that. And also, though, because it was part of your spiritual journey. So I thought, and I didn't mean to throw you off the loop. I didn't say we were going to talk about this, but you learned, right? So you want to maybe spend a minute just talking about that adventure and that.
I'll give you the very quick story because it's literally a realization in literally the last few years.
Right.
So I always knew from my mother that her mother was Jewish. I think it was Poland or Russia. I think she lived in both countries at some time. I didn't get a lot of great detail about it, but I knew for a fact my mother's mother was Jewish. So I used to tell people for many years that I was an eighth Jew because of that kind of right? And so anyway, there's a guy called Yuval Elias who was the CISO, group CISO at Standard Chartered, who became a very good friend of mine. And I remember going into his office. He was from Israel. He's gone back to live in Israel now. And I remember sitting in his office, we were having a conversation. I said, "Oh, by the way, Yuval, do you know that I'm eighth Jewish?" He went, "What are you talking about? You can't be an eighth Jew." I went, "Yeah." I says, "My grandmother was." He went, "Darren, you're Jewish." I went, "What?" He went, "Yeah." And he told me all about this. If your mother's, it goes through the lineage and everything else. And I was super curious about this. And then Team 8, by the way, Team 8 who based in Israel, they run cybersecurity, very similar in kind of Night Dragon space. They invited me to one of their events, actually, which was in Israel. And I got an opportunity to go there and experience the kind of culture firsthand. And I wrote the article, as you saw on LinkedIn. And it was a very strange feeling, a bit of kind of a homecoming. And
I love it. And look, and we don't have time to get into all this, but we can talk. I'm fascinated about this because, first of all, yes, you're Jewish. I mean, and your grandmother. See, Jews are a bit different. You can be a people, and you were. So you could be an atheist. But all joking aside, your grandmother was a Holocaust survivor, and I'm guessing she probably after the Holocaust, a lot of people did one thing: either they became more religious because they insulated, or they hid it and avoided it. And so,
she definitely hid it.
Right. Because that was out of fear, right? Never wanting any. And so, look. Life is amazing if we take the opportunity to really always learn and evolve. And I will say, I am so happy that you joined us for 2 segments. I feel like, I've grown as a person talking to you, and I'm so excited to get to know you more. What you're doing is amazing. You're a good person. You're a kind person. You're somebody that evolves. You have a smile on your face, and you really, you show your excitement, and that helps me as a person grow. So you've made a difference in my life and hopefully to the viewers and the listeners. But on that note, remind us for a moment, where can folks go to get information on the Leadership Institute?
So the easiest place, Fred, is to go online, just search cyberleadershipinstitute.com. You'll get the website. And literally, if you click on any of those links, you'll get access to everything that you need. The key thing that people need to find on that website is the Cyber Leadership Hub. You'll see it as a free option, as a drop-down. You click on that, you get free access to the Cyber Leadership Hub, an open community who's welcoming, it's global, and you get access to myself, Jan and Phil, the 3 co-founders, almost instantly, which is great as well. And we'd love people just to join that for free, find out, connect with people, and start contributing, by the way, being mentors to others. If you're somebody senior, if you're not somebody senior and you're looking for mentors, you'll find mentors on that platform as well. So it's a great way to get started.
And the book, where could they find the book?
So Amazon, you can do a search on Amazon, the Cyber Leadership Imperative. You'll find it. Just do the search, Cyber Leadership Imperative, and it's on Amazon. So it's out now.
Thank you again, Darren. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity, Fred. It's been great.
Are you kidding? It's been all my pleasure. And then for you folks out there, thank you again for listening or watching. Make sure you subscribe to Net Impact wherever you listen or watch your podcasts. And make sure you give ThriveDX a follow on X, formerly known, of course, as Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram. And we will see you next time. It's been a great, great show. Thanks again, Darren.
Thanks, Fred. Thank you. Cheers.
Today's podcast is brought to you by ThriveDX, the global leader in cybersecurity training. Now, are you interested in learning more about becoming a cybersecurity professional or how to better secure the future of your organization? Visit thrivedx.com for more details, and make sure you follow us on YouTube, LinkedIn, Instagram, and X, formerly known as Twitter, for updates, info, and more. And before we go, I want to thank everyone who helped make this possible. my dynamic executive producer, Michael Seth Prell, our producer and publicist, Carrie Ann Hilton. The design and original music was done by Gilly Fox, Ksenia Aron, and Muro Hana. Our editors, Modi Nachum and Amit Zach. Our advisor, Yoni Neiman, and our manager, Leora Zeri. And the entire operation was overseen by Eugenio Robino Writer at Thrive DX. Thanks to this incredible team. Thanks everyone for joining us. This is Fred Menachem, 0 to 60 and nothing in between. We'll see you in the next episode.